Hello, Universal Basic Income enthusiasts. In this month's edition of UBI4ME, we have Marcel,
Hello.
and my name is Daniela. And today we will talk about why it is a problem that rich people do not want to share and how that links back to a UBI and why it is important to use all of our available options to make sure that everyone gets the fair share of the economy. Marcel, do you want to start off briefly or should I? If we keep losing you, you keep disappearing for a split second and then coming back, by the way.
Okay. Do you want to start?
Okay, so a quick introduction to the topic for today. About 30 years ago, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and similarly rich people signed a pledge that throughout their lifetimes they will give at least half, if not the majority of the money away to good causes. Now, I think that's a great pledge. I think I'm fully behind it. More people, as in more really wealthy and rich people, should be doing that. And so I'm a big fan. Now, there are other rich people or wealthy people, such as Peter Thiel, who not only not sign on to it, no, they go one step further. They dissuade people to join the group, the benevolent group, and they try and get as many people unsigned of this document and unpledge the money so that their money would not go to good causes, or as Peter Thiel words it, to the left propaganda causes. Now, I don't think that eradicating child poverty or certain diseases that don't impact a lot of people, I don't think that's a bad idea at all. I think there's always a good positive aspect to science and progress and to helping other people. That's my take on things. Now, why is that important to everyone, and why should everyone be thinking about that as the diabolical act that it really is? First of all, Peter Thiel in March 2026 is supposed to have a rough net worth of give or take 28 billion. I'm thinking if when it's definitely more than an M, must be a B. Maybe trillion is a bit too much just yet, but 28 billion approximately. He pays an estimate on the richest 25 people in the USA is an estimate of about 3.4% income tax, if that at all. In 2019, he paid no income tax. So every single person out there listening who pays income tax or capital gains tax or any other tax on what they receive in monetary income, think about how much do you pay? Do you pay 5% or less? Because if you do, congratulations, you seem to have a sweet deal going. If you pay more, and I'm just thinking of our European friends here with the Netherlands around about 65%, Switzerland with also the 50-60% region, and so on. So, how do you feel now knowing that somebody that wealthy pays that much less in tax? Do you think he's sharing his wealth? Do you think he would say no to somebody giving him free money through charity? In addition to not only stopping people from giving charitable donations, Peter Thiel has benefited from government handouts and from donations to small companies and startups. So he himself has been a beneficiary of charity in this respect. And at the same time, he says, no, nobody else can have it. Think about it. I call it unfair, unjust, and, as I said before, diabolical. And one of the reasons why it impacts everyone is it stops people from getting the help and the resources they need so that they can work on the startup that they want. There are a lot of people out there that have good ideas, but They can't work on them because they have a day job. They may have 2 or 3 day jobs even because they can't afford to take holidays or they can't afford to retire. A lot of them can't even afford to stay home with their children whilst they need extra care in the first few years of their lives. So, what do you think is going to happen then? If you can't afford to take the time to work on your project, that can be a good, decent startup. How are you going to make that happen? Do you really think Peter Thiel, without his father's connections and money, would have made the empire he has now? I don't think so. So if he was able to benefit from charity, why not us? Why not all of us? Before I go further with my rant, Marcel, do you want to add something?
I think it's worth just playing devil's advocate for a moment. The main argument, I think, is that if you work hard, you deserve what you earn. And those that don't work hard, right, deserve nothing. It's the grasshopper ant fable where the grasshopper was enjoying the summer, jumping around, having time of its life, and not working, whereas the ant was keeping and storing and looking for food all summer, so that when the winter came, the ant had lots of food to see himself through the winter, and the grasshopper had nothing. And when the grasshopper asked the ant, can you share it? It says, well, why should I share it? You spent the summer having fun and enjoying yourself and not saving anything for the winter. And it's that basic argument that poor people deserve nothing because they didn't work hard, and rich people deserve what they got because they work hard. Now, the extension to that argument is from a capitalistic point of view, that the market takes care of things, that if you do any form of distortion through taxation or philanthropy or charity, then you're misallocating resources. Resources should go to the person who was prepared to pay the most for them. So the rich should be able to get all the resources because they can afford it, and the poor shouldn't because they can't afford it, and they shouldn't because they won't be allocating it appropriately. So money needs to be allocated appropriately, and the market does that for you. So there's two aspects to it. That one, if you work hard, you will get what you deserve, and you shouldn't have tax stealing your money and giving it to someone who doesn't deserve it because they didn't work hard. And the second thing is that market sure that money gets allocated appropriately, and it's the better way of doing things. So anyone who's giving away money, either through philanthropy or charity, is distorting market forces, and one should carry on spending money in the most appropriate way because you have earned that money, and therefore you have shown that you know how to allocate money to make more money, and therefore you should be getting that money. So this is the basic argument, is that the rich feel that they deserve the money they have. And it goes further. I mean, from an inheritance point of view, my family deserves this money. They worked hard in the past. However they managed to get it, we shouldn't question. They obviously worked hard because that's how the capitalistic forces have worked for the last 500 years. And those families that have worked hardest, have been smartest, been able to allocate resources appropriately, should be allowed to keep the money and continue to allocate resources appropriately going forward. And this, I think, is a sum of the argument for why the rich should be able to keep their money and the poor shouldn't get any money. Obviously, I have an issue with this, as you've rightly pointed out, that it's a lot of it is based on inheritance. A lot of it is based on having the safety net of your parents. If you have rich parents, or you basically have the connections from your parents, or any form of advantage, any form of privilege that you have going forward, is a starting point that other people don't have. And to argue that you deserve because you had all these privileges to start with is the flaw in the argument that Peter Thiel and others like him, who choose to believe that they deserve what they get, right, do not take into account. They will argue that from an inheritance point of view, that especially white versus black people deserve what they can get because they're smarter and they can allocate resources properly. No one questions where that money came from in the first place, when quite literally, if we look back in time, most of that money is stolen money, through war and violence and viciousness, where people basically took the money as a starting point and were either part of the soldiers that were allocated the money or whatever. There's a history of violence with regards to taking land, and if we look at just all the land in the US, the mere fact that the Native Americans that were here long before anyone, even before the Vikings arrived, right, have had that land stolen from them at some way or form. So the people who say, "Oh, well, I got this land because of hard, allocated to me through legal means, etc." Forget that a lot of what we have is stolen. Never mind the slavery that was used to build up huge wealth, from your plantations, etc. So there's a lot of history that's overlooked, and arguing that I deserve what I got because I worked hard for it is flawed. But that's not the way rich people see it.
Exactly. Um, there is more to the topic that you've just gone into. So, for example, the decision, your parents' decision, how many children they will have. For example, if you're an only child, you get married to another only child, you inherit two houses. And if that happened 4 or 5 generations ago, over time, you build wealth, your family builds wealth. Whereas
Or
if
you
you,
were just the eldest
or
son.
or if it depends on the culture, whether it's the eldest son or the youngest person or whatever. There are different inheritance structures, but the number of children your parents choose to have did have a huge impact on how your life is going to run and how much you will have as well. But yes, inheritance is a very, very good and important topic here as well. And again,
And I
what
think what also we forget is that the entrepreneurial aspect of it. People say, I took risks and therefore deserve the rewards that I get. Sure, you worked hard, you started a business, you made lots of money, but we forget the fact that there's a lot of luck also that's involved. Or should we say there's a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck. But if you don't have that luck, then you will fail. And to argue that you failed because you didn't work hard enough or you weren't smart enough, I think overlooks the fact that there's a lot of, it's not a lot of, there's a little bit of luck involved in addition to the hard work that entrepreneurs get with it. Assuming that you can even start that entrepreneurial work, which is what you said at the start.
True, but if we think about Alexander Graham Bell, for example, who famously said he found 100 ways of how not to make a light bulb. How long does it take for normal standard people to run out of money? How many trials are they going to find? 1, 5, 10, 50? How many ways can they fail before there's the end of the money and they have to either go back to a day job or something else
Also,
because
it
they've
wasn't
run out?
him that found 1,000 ways that a light bulb didn't work. It's all the people that worked for him that found all those ways that failed.
Yes. And that again, if you don't have the starting capital to build a company with, to pay people who are smart enough to find the ways that don't work, plus the way that does work, how is that going to pan out? And it won't. So how do we make sure that humanity as a whole gets the best out of everyone on the planet? And surely, in my opinion, that would be that everyone has a similar chance of using their brain to the best of their abilities. Thinking about entrepreneurial items now, I mean, there are other types of talents, like sports, for example, or music, but thinking about entrepreneurship and within the context of money, let's make sure that we get the brightest people to do the right roles and get the right funding to do that. And one step in that direction would be universal basic income. Because if nothing else, it allows everyone to have the education they need because they would not have to stop education in order to get a day job.
I think also worth pointing out that from just looking at actors and artists in general, that a very few are extremely successful, and many, many, many very good artists and actors and things like that are unsuccessful, despite them actually being very good, very talented. They just didn't have that little bit of luck, to be in the right place, or as we know from various Me Too movements, weren't prepared to do, the dirty to get that success in the first place. I think it's also worth mentioning, I don't think philanthropy, personally, I don't think philanthropy is the right way forward. Philanthropy basically is saying to rich people again, who are really arguing that they should be the ones that allocate resources. Philanthropy basically means that rich people get to decide who to allocate their resources to, right? Or what to allocate those resources to, right? How that extra money that they've made should be spent. They're the ones that get to decide that. And I think there's an issue with that, with taxation. At least the money goes into the big pot, and then there's departments and things like that who decide. Now, I have issues obviously with the fact that from a taxation point of view, the representatives in power, and who are typically rich people, or at least are sponsored by those rich people through lobbying and things like that, get to decide how that money is spent. So there's another issue about, from a government perspective, how they decide how the money is getting spent. But at least it's not the rich people directly who are deciding directly how to spend that money through philanthropy. There's at least some form of representation within our representative democracy that we currently have that gets to decide how that money gets spent going forward. But obviously the UBI is why it's so powerful, is that you give at least a portion of that taxation money to people directly, and then those individual people get to decide how to spend their money. And I think that's the key message, is who gets to decide how that money gets spent. Should rich people philanthropy? Should governments or the representatives decide it? Or should the individuals through UBI decide how the money gets spent?
It's an incredibly valid point, and I believe that all of it starts with everyone being taxed the same. And that's where I do think that Peter Thiel's evil plan to get people to stop supporting good causes links up with universal basic income. And that is, to fund universal basic income, everyone would need to be taxed the same way. And that means Peter Thiel would have to pay in the Netherlands, 65% tax rate that people are being taxed. And let's just add on top of that the new capital gains tax, let's call it that for a moment. That means that wealthy people who hold stocks in companies, they will be taxed on how much they hold in the stock market as well. This will be rolled out in 2028, I believe, 2029 possibly. So things like those, and that is where rich people, rather than through philanthropy, then contribute like everyone else, like me, like you, like everyone else. They will contribute to society simply by paying the taxes. And this is where, in my opinion, UBI and the Peter Thiel story link up. First of all, everyone should be taxed the same. And secondly, everyone should get the same UBI. And yes, Peter Thiel also would receive a UBI, just like you, like me, like anyone else you see on the streets, in your company, out and about when you walk around. Everyone should be taxed the same. Everyone should get the same UBI. And with that, not everyone will have the same chances. I will never be a basketball player. that's just it. I will never be a
You're allowed to
ballerina.
play basketball if you want to play basketball.
I was the best player in my school team. I've never made it to a proper competition, and I never will. But there are certain things I'm not good at, and I've realized that, and I'm happy with it. So not everyone has the same opportunities simply because of how, or the skills they're born with. But at the same time, everyone has a more equal playing field when it comes down to education, and when it comes down to taking those risks and trying something out when they have a good idea. And then it doesn't take one person being the figurehead for light bulbs anymore. Then either everyone can try it themselves at home, or they can group together in all sorts of different setups. Let's call them companies for now, but different groups organizing themselves, using each other's skills to come up with innovation that is not yet on the market, that does not exist yet. And through that, we can progress as mankind, as one society. And that's why I do think that wealthy and rich people should be asked for their money. Now, I don't have the power myself, but I can go and vote. As long as we still have the opportunity and responsibility to go and vote for someone, I would always recommend vote for the party that has UBI on the program. You may not agree with everything they do. You may not agree with, it's usually the Green parties, so you may not agree with a push towards public transport because you live somewhere in the countryside, somewhere where there isn't any public transport right now. And I understand that. But at the same time, the benefits of receiving a UBI and bring about a change that ultimately will push mankind to a better place, in my opinion, are worthwhile. Thoughts?
Exactly. I mean, it's a UBI doesn't necessarily address the huge wealth inequality that we have at the moment, but it does give people the bare minimum, right, to basically try something different, try something new, try something, and have that safety net that rich people normally get from their parents. That be able to not worry about getting it all wrong, not worry about failing, because you're not going to starve at the end of the day. If you lose everything because your business idea wasn't a success, because despite having worked very hard, despite making business sense, somebody else got there first, or whatever. You weren't lucky enough to get that that smart person working on your team who cracks the secret to getting out there and what was necessary first, getting that first light bulb out there, for example. I think it just gives everyone an opportunity to try something new, try something different. And arguing that only those that are rich should be allowed to get that opportunity is, the sad state of affairs that people like Peter Thiel, right, think that, it's a terrible idea, left-wing propaganda. All we're doing is asking, people to giving people the opportunity to try something new, try what they want, their ideas, put their ideas into action without worrying about failing. And I think that's the key thing, because failing can be the end of everything. And that's what we want to avoid.
Exactly. So, what do you think out there? Do let us know in the comments below. Do you have a great idea that you would like to make happen? How would you, if you had the power to change the current rules, how would you change them? What would you make happen? What would you remove from the rule set that we live under at the moment? What do you think?
I think it's interesting, do people who are not rich think that they deserve to be poor because they didn't work hard enough? Or do they think that the rich deserve what they get because obviously they worked very hard, or they were smart enough, or they had rich enough parents, right, to be able to justify maintaining that wealth within the family? I'm always astounded when I speak to people who are definitely on the lower rungs of the wealth ladder, who think that their family and working hard for their family to protect what their family has is way more important, no matter how small it is from a wealth perspective, than making sure that everyone gets equal opportunity to be able to try something new, try something different.
Would you mind repeating that last sentence, please? You broke up on my end.
I think it's very difficult to understand how people who have a very basic wealth, they've worked very hard, they've had a job for the last 40 years, they've managed to scrimp and save enough to create a little nest egg, and they want to keep that nest egg for themselves and for themselves only, and their family, to make sure that their family goes forward. And they think that that's far more important, even from their own little perspective, than making sure that everyone gets an opportunity to try something new, try something different, try something for themselves that a UBI will offer. They would rather hang on to their little bit and therefore support the system. That means that rich people get to hang on to their big bit, right, than provide any form of sharing whatsoever. And I understand that. I mean, I understand that people who work hard and they've managed to pay off that they want to make sure that they don't lose their wealth. But what they're doing at the same time is making sure that the extreme rich, right, get to keep everything, and that they are actually at a disadvantage, even in the short term, by protecting their own little nest egg from taxation or whatever. Worried that they would have to be the ones that pay the extra tax, something for somebody who doesn't deserve it, because the poor are poor because they didn't work hard.
Understandably so, given that if you analyze who has had tax increases over the last 20, 30, 40 years and who had tax breaks at the same time, I understand why some people don't want to have an even bigger change. But I do fear that without a bigger change, without a move to something a lot more sociable, a lot more inclusive, that we will all fall behind. Because what happens now is that with automation, artificial intelligence, the large language models, robotics, and all of that, fewer jobs will go around. We already have declining population numbers in pretty much every country. There are a few growing countries, but not that many. I'm I don't care how many children are born every year, but all I'm saying is that unless there is a change in how we think about money and its distribution, there will not be a good outcome. There will not be a positive outcome for the majority of people. So chances are, if you're listening to us, then you won't have a good outcome either, I'm afraid. So my strong recommendation still is, whilst we still can vote, go and vote for the party with universal basic income on the program. Another alternative is to go and run for office yourself. Make it so. Make the future that you want to see. It is a possibility, not for everyone. Again, not everyone is the type to be voted and elected for office. But throw your hat in the ring, see what it's all about, learn about the process where you live, and see what happens. There's nothing you can do wrong. There's no problem with failing either in this case, because at least you will have tried.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's my opinion. So
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what other people think. Look forward to any feedback that we get. Do people think that, for example, in the US, that the average $3,000 a year tax reduction that the average family has received is worth giving away all those other services that have been cut from the social system? Do they really think that they came out positive because they got a $3,000 a year tax break?
they may have gotten a $3,000 a year tax break, but the health insurance has gone up by about 2 or 3,000. Plus, on top of that, they now have higher oil prices, which will translate into higher prices for everything, literally
Yeah.
everything.
I'm just interested to see whether people
Yeah.
think that the 3,000 tax break was worth, the cuts that it was made to other social services.
Let us know. If you're listening, let us know what is your own experience. Please share your lived experience more than stories from other people. The reason for that is because not everyone is painting the right and correct picture to understand for everyone. So by hearing from you directly and firsthand, it's a lot easier to understand what's going on in the world. Therefore, please tell us what you think, what your opinions are, what do you see in your real life every day.
Should be interesting.
Yes. Is there anything else you would like to share this month?
Not this month. Save it
Good.
for next time.
Then thanks for listening. As I said, always call to action. Go and vote every single time you can. Run for office yourself as much and as often as you can. Speak with all of your friends and family and children and everyone you meet about universal basic income and how it potentially could change the world and the future to something much more enjoyable and fair and, well, better, simply better. Imagine all of the science that could happen at this point. And join us next month, the first Tuesday in June.
We can't do the first Tuesday
Sorry,
in
not
June.
the first Tuesday in June this time. We will put out the next date. It may be the first Thursday in June, but look at our website and follow us on Mastodon. I'll put the links down below. And then we will speak with you then and join us, tell us what you think, and let's make UBI happen together. See you then. Bye
Bye.
bye.